Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of Visual Lounge, and today we are in studio with a very special guest, Tim Slade. Welcome, Tim, to the Visual Lounge.
Thanks for having me, Matt. That was a fun intro.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Same every time. You know what? This is actually the most lounge-like we've actually gotten
I know.
on the show. So.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, we're glad that you get to be here in person, and we're gonna have a great conversation today. So we like to start with one question, though.
Okay.
What's a tip you'd give all of our viewers about using images or video better in their work? So anything that you've been maybe leveling up on yourself?
I don't know. This is going to sound really not practical, so I apologize. I don't get better about using your imagination. So much of what we do with video editing and visual communications requires a strong ability to envision it in your mind's eye. And so, pull that thing out of the dusty attic of your mind that you put away somewhere between middle school and adulthood and use your imagination.
Yeah, I think if you go back into the kind of the archives of the TED Talks, Sir Ken Robinson used to talk about creativity, and by third grade, most kids have stopped being kind of that really awesome creative because we just kind of squash it out of them. I actually made in second grade, I remember this, I made a whole book because Star Wars was a rage when I was a kid. The second one, so I'm old.
Yeah.
But I made a whole book on Star Wars, like a whole drawn, colored book, and it was very creative. And then I remember at the end of the year, teacher's like, why did you do that?
When I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be an architect. And so I would have my parents always buy me pads of graph paper. I still use graph paper for notebooks. And I would draw out house plans and building plans. And I don't know. I loved architecture for some reason.
Well, I love this. Let's talk about creativity for a little bit, because I do think it's one of the things that comes across as like we see so many tools, and TechSmith is part of that we try to make it as easy as possible for people to make things, but ultimately the tool isn't necessarily the limiter. So what do you think gets in the way between someone using a tool well and making really, really good learning experiences versus just kind of using the base, doing whatever?
Yeah. I think one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is that they think the more complex tool you use, it's going to result in a better output or outcome. And, with a lot of my videos, I get asked all the time on YouTube about what tool are you using to animate your video or edit your video, or how you must be using, a really complex program by such and such company to create that cool animation. And they're always shocked when I'm like, no, I just do it all. It's all in Camtasia. I do all of my animation work in Camtasia. And so I think there's just this misconception that, a more complex tool results in better outcomes. And it's not really about the tool that you use, it's how you use it and who's using it and the vision you have behind what you're creating. I used to do, before I knew how to do motion graphic animations in Camtasia, I would do a lot of it in PowerPoint using the morph animation, to create things that move across the screen. And, going back to that original thing about using your imagination, all of that had to start with an idea of what I wanted to have happen and then use a tool to figure out how to make it happen, and a lot of times, in most cases, a lot of the most interesting stuff I've created has been with the most simple tools.
So when you are starting to put together, and I know you do a lot of different types of things. I've seen a lot of your motion graphics, and they look great. They're awesome. But I think inherently for a lot of people, that's not a natural thing to understand how to put things together or even to get that inspiration. Where are you drawing from? What kind of things do you look at and say oh, yeah, I could use that for X, Y, or Z?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's two things I want to say. I mean, there's inspiration everywhere if you look. I'll be at in an airport in a terminal or checking into a hotel, and you'll see a kiosk with things moving, and I'll whip out my phone and I'll start recording that because that's a source of inspiration. Or if you watch interesting commercials where there's a lot of moving graphics, and if you just listen to it on mute and you pay attention to what's happening on the screen, there's sources of inspiration there. And then when you break it apart and you look at it, it's a lot of just entrance and exit animations and maybe some motion paths and stuff like that. But most of these animations you see out in the world are really simple. It's just brought together with great looking graphics and a good story behind it. I was growing up in middle school and high school and into college. I was a huge theater geek, and I majored in theater when I first started going to college. And one of the things that I have continually leaned back on, and I hear this from other folks in the industry who have theater backgrounds, is they almost envision their slide or their screen like a stage. Mm-hmm. And the graphics that you put on it are set pieces that you're using to tell your story. And so when I'm creating something, I view it like that. I view it like it's a stage, a little theater, and I'm creating a little show for my audience, because it's really what you're doing.
So when you're in the process of designing something, it could be any of these maybe learning modules or whatever, how often do you find that you're doing it and it's one and done? Because I think sometimes people think the process is easy. I think sometimes people think it should be like your first pass, you're going to nail it. Do you find that you're often very iterative, or are you at a point where you kind of got like a library of things that you go to, and that's mostly kind of what you're leaning on?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this previously in past podcasts about the importance of having a repeatable process as part of your production, mm-hmm. especially if you're churning out a lot of content, whether it's on YouTube or for work or whatnot. And so there's certain things that I have down that I can do it once and be done. The intro and outro of my videos, I can rattle that off just like you rattle off the opening to this podcast, right? But all the stuff that happens in the middle, it's rarely one and done. And if I do animations or B-roll, that's rarely one and done. But I think what it is more so now that I've done it for as long as I've done it, it's not so much that I'm trying something and then redoing it, trying something and redoing it. It usually is I'm starting with a simple animation, let's say, and then I'll do that. And then I start adding additional layers of complexity. So I might go, okay, cool, I got it to animate in and out the way I want. Now, how do I make it more interesting? What else am I going to add to it? Maybe I'll have it move, or I'll add something else, another element, or then I'll start adding motion blur, or I'll play with the behaviors so it doesn't bounce in, bounce out. And so it usually starts simple, and then my iterative process is complexity, if that makes sense.
Love it. Understand where we're going. But one of the things I've learned, and I'm still bad at this, I'll just be 100% honest, just not great at it, is oftentimes I'm doing that process, I'm adding, and I'm adding, and I'm adding, and I often don't know when to stop. And it feels like simplicity should win the day. But do you have signals or things that you look for to say like, gosh, this was great, a step back, but now I've gone too far with the kind of layering on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever I teach people or I'm talking about visual design, one of the things that I tell people they need to really pay attention to is, when you look at a graphic or an animation or whatever, there's one of the great things I learned from Nancy Duarte in her book Slideology is about the signal versus noise test. So you look at something and you go, is it delivering a signal or is it delivering noise? And the way that you determine that is you listen to what's almost on the edge of your conscious versus subconscious. So whenever I'm talking about this, I'm usually in Vegas because we're at a conference there. And I'll usually tell people like, look at the room and what is subconsciously distracting you. And it's always like the carpet.
Yep.
The carpet has a weird pattern on it. And those are the things you want to pay attention to because it's distracting you from the main thing you should be paying attention to. And so I will look at something, I'll play back what I created, and I'll pay attention to where my mind is going on the screen versus where I really want it to be. And it's usually that tells me, oh, that's something I need to cut out because it's distracting my attention.
Right.
That's not science, but it works for me.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up Nancy Duarte because she has some fantastic information out there. And, one thing that we used to do in design a lot when I was working on a training team is, and less about the motion and the graphic, but like looking and squinting, right? Like just kind of squinting at that screen and saying like, okay, what is popping out? And is it the thing that I want to stand out?
Sure.
And it's the same thing with like any kind of, like, what is the thing that's happening here? And is it supposed to be drawing my attention or not? And if it's drawing my attention, it's not supposed to, then there's a problem there.
And the other thing that I do too is like the things that I want my audience to pay attention to the most, those are the ones that are going to move the most heavily. So, for example, I recently created this. I'm calling it a commercial for my business. It's a minute and a half little feature video, and this is going to sound really weird, but I have a main character in this video, and it's a mouse cursor. And the mouse cursor moves along the screen, and what it really is doing is it's directing the attention of what I want people to pay attention to. And so that has the most movement because it's pointing to the things I want people to look at. And then everything else is a little bit softer in its movement. And so there's little strategies like that you can use to, help contrive what you're really wanting your audience to pay attention to.
Well, otherwise they don't know, right? They don't know what is most important until you tell them, and then you tell them again and again. Well, one of the things that I know you have some strong opinions about AI, but I want to bring AI into this because we do see we're at this point where it's still early, but we're seeing maybe more of the outsourcing of the creativity to AI, or people are trying to figure out how does it play into this role of, what can it do for me, how to, design. What are your thoughts about the role of AI here in terms of, I think, getting people to understand how it should or shouldn't play in the work that they're doing in terms of creation?
Yeah. I think the big mistake a lot of people have made with AI, and I think a big mistake that a lot of companies are making with how they market AI, is that it's a tool that you can use to outsource all of that really hard creative work that most people tend to struggle with. And I think the problem with that is, if you're going to outsource all of the creative work, well, then you might as well just lay yourself off, because you're going to be the first one to get laid off at that point. If you can just outsource all of the magic that what makes people like the creative work that we do. And the truth is that outsourcing that creative work, the art of what we do, it just results in a lot of boring, crappy crap, in my opinion, that all looks the same, that looks generic, that isn't completely on brand as much as we'd want it to be on brand. And so I don't view AI as a tool to help us outsource our creativity, but a tool to make our creativity more efficient. And so where, AI right now, where it excels is it excels when it's given a very specific task with really high guardrails, So I might use AI to remove, ums from my video. That's a great use case for you, AI. Or automatically transcribe a video or audio. That's a great use case for AI. But to think that you can just type in a magical prompt and it's going to produce an on-brand video with everything that you want it to do, I think is just, it's a ridiculous notion. And I don't think anyone really wants that.
Yeah. So for, I guess, someone who's maybe newer to the role, and I know you talk to a lot of folks through your eLearning Academy that are trying to figure out the world of learning, design, training, things like that. If you were to give them some guardrails in terms of being creative, and whether that involves AI or not, any principles, guidelines you'd say hey, here's some things to hold to make sure you're being really creative and designing good stuff, and you're not, just phoning it in with AI.
Yeah. I mean, referring back to the Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk that you mentioned earlier, one of the things he talks about in that TED Talk that differentiates adults versus children, and when it comes to their creativity, is that children are willing to take risks and they're willing to play. And as adults, our willingness to take those risks are lower because usually when you make mistakes, those are stigmatized in society, at work or at school or what have you. And the thing about creativity is it requires a willingness to play and create something that might be really, really bad and iterate on it and play some more. And a lot of people's creative muscles have atrophied because we don't do that. We look at very stereotypical corporate PowerPoints. Everyone sticks to bullet points because bullet points are safe. Nobody's going to complain about that. Not that we won't complain about it, but it's safe. You know what I mean? We'll complain about it because, that's what we would do, right? And so, again, it's not a practical tip, but you have to be willing to play and be wrong. And I'm going to misquote it here. There's a really famous graphic designer, I think he was in the 80s, created a bunch of famous movie posters, and he said 99% of graphic design and visual design is just moving stuff around until it looks good. And that's just requiring, some playing around.
Well, I think one thing I'm hearing here is that, and this is hard, especially in corporate environments, economy, what it is, all those things, time is what it is, that takes time and that takes deliberate practice, right? And I think that's hard for people to find and do. You know, you do consulting, you've got your own kind of work that you're doing. How do you make sure that in your kind of day to day that you're finding that time? Is it like, because I imagine you're busy. Like I know how much time and effort you put into your work, and so it's not a surprise that if you said to me like, "Gosh, that's like the hardest thing you ever have to do," but like, what does your schedule? What do you do to make sure you're getting that time to play and be creative and innovative? Because you make great stuff.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I used to manage a team, one of the things I learned about myself and one of the things that I would look for in the people I would hire is I had a really interesting way of separating the people who were truly interested in the work that we were doing, the creative work, and those who weren't. And the people who are truly interested are the ones who they might go home, you know, after work and they take care of the kids and all of that stuff, but they are so enthralled in that creative work that they're going to open up their computer and play around with that tool and see what they can do with it. And they're going to get lost in that on their own because they're really passionate about it. And so my opinion is that, you know, if it's something you're truly interested in and it's something that actually, you know, lights you up and brings you joy and satisfaction like it does for me, then you'll make the time for it. Mm-hmm. You'll make the time for it. You know, I got up at 3 a.m. to be here, right? Driving from Chicago. I was up until 10 o'clock last night animating a video because I had just filmed and I was enthralled with it. And so you will make the time. I'm tired. I'm busy. That's just, you know, that's what it is. But if you're truly interested in it, then you'll make the time for it. And from a consultant standpoint, you know, the onus is on me to let my clients know that is a requirement of creating the work that ultimately is what they're hiring me for.
Right.
If I were to cut those corners and try to be more efficient at the cost of the craft of what I'm creating, which again is why they hired me for, then I'd be doing them a disservice.
Well, if you need a wellness room, we got a place we can take a quick
fine.
nap.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, I appreciate the advice that you've given because I'm hearing a lot of things that, even though we're not necessarily talking about video, and I want to just make clear for the audience, like these are things that are foundational, you know, being creative, being thoughtful, because I think as we said at the beginning, the tools are the tools. The tools will do what they can do, but it's what I've learned in my tenure at TechSmith is that the people that I watch that are really good at making videos or putting together really good graphics, it's not that they've done anything that anyone else can't do, but it's how they bring the elements together to make things that work better, mm-hmm. you know, that are unique. And so I appreciate that perspective because I think it's one that in the process of, we talk a lot about learning things. And this is one of those things that like, yes, there's learning, but it is taking that time to do a little bit more, to be engaged, to spend some time. And I know that's hard to do, but that's where it pays off. So any final, we'll go into our speed round questions in just a second, but any other advice, tips, thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
No.
Good.
No.
We're running out of time.
Okay, that's fine.
No. Okay. Well, we're going to do speed round a little bit differently because I don't have my dice here.
That's fine.
I'm going to have to get a set for the studio now
I know.
in case we do more of this. Okay. So we've got numbers 1 to 12.
Okay.
You get to pick.
8.
Number 8. Perfect. We kind of talked about this, but where do you turn for inspiration? You said it's kind of everywhere. Anywhere else specifically that you've been, maybe what's a specific thing you've gotten inspiration from recently? How about that?
It kind of goes back to what I said earlier, but I get inspiration all the time from all sorts of things. And what I will oftentimes look for is inspiration outside of our industry. You know, the way people will use video to market their service or their product or their business, or the way they'll create intros or outros for something. You know, there's this, I think another misconception is that, and this is not a speed round answer, is that, you know, everything's original and everyone's creating things from scratch. And it's like, no, everyone's sampling this and that and adapting it, you know? And so if you were to look at any piece of work that I've created, video work, I could like dissect it and point to like 11 different things where I'm like, oh, I saw that animation over here and I pulled that into here. And then they did this little thing with the text and I pulled it in over here. So like everywhere.
No, that's
everything.
Fair answer. A good artist copy, great artist steal kind of thing. Yeah. Picasso. So Steve Jobs, depending on who you want to
Sure.
quote.
Yeah.
Okay, we got 1 to 12, but not 8.
Okay. 3.
3. What's a piece of advice you wish you could give your younger self? So think about younger Tim. What would you tell younger Tim?
Stop giving a what everyone thinks. That's what I would have told myself. Nobody, just do what you want to do.
Good.
But you learn that in your 30s. I'm almost 40, so that's when you learn that. You know what I mean? But I would have told myself that a lot earlier and taken more creative risks.
Love it. All right, one more.
Yeah.
1 to 12.
Oh, one more. Oh, okay. We did 8. We did 3. We'll do 6.
Share a piece of advice that you've received that's had lasting impact on you. So something maybe someone told you or something you picked up along the way that's just kind of helped you.
Yeah, that others can't want for your success more than you want it for yourself. A lot of times, which is nothing to, maybe we can make a connection to creativity, but a lot of times I think people sit around passively waiting for others to take the lead on their professional development, skills development, or career. And the reality is you have to care for it more for yourself than you can expect others.
Yeah, you got to be the nurturer of that, because if you don't care, it's like when you have water poured in, it can only go to the level of the water. Like
sure,
no one else is going to lift you up beyond that, except for maybe your mom.
Well, that's their job. Yeah,
although sometimes not.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, Tim, this has been awesome. If people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about the eLearning Academy, we'll put stuff in the links below, but where should they turn?
Yeah, eLearningacademy.io.
And what will they get there?
They'll get me and my book and learn about all things for new instructional designers and e-learning developers.
Tim, what is your final take?
My final take is that creativity is hard. It takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a willingness to be vulnerable and get things wrong along the way. But creativity is a muscle that you have to exercise. And for a lot of people, we've put that muscle away and it's atrophied over the years. And if you're wanting to create more original work or more creative work or increase your skill set and create more custom things, then you have to get familiar and friendly with that creative muscle. And it doesn't mean you have to be an artist. I don't consider myself an artist, but I'm creative. And so getting familiar with that is where it starts.
Thanks for chatting with me, Tim.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, you can always find us on the Visual Lounge. You can email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. But here's the thing that I want you to take away from today is think about the things that you're doing. Your work is inherently creative, right? You're making things, and that creativity is not something you can outsource. It is not something that you can ask somebody else to do for you. It is you have to put the time in, have to put the effort, and it is like a muscle, which I know we all hate doing our exercises and doing the reps that we have to do, but the more you do it, the better you're going to get, and the more opportunities you're going to have to stretch that. And I can tell you, learning, training, developing videos, things like that, it is something that is essential to making great quality videos, great quality learning. With that said, we hope that you guys maybe listen a little bit and take some time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.